a guest that hasn't been with us for a couple of weeks simply because of scheduling difficulties. Everybody's doing all kinds of things. Now, for some reason, why am I not able to get his image on there? I'm talking, of course, about Dr. Scott Bennett. Hello, Scott.
Good to be with you, Jason.
You too. For some reason, I can't get your display for some reason, so hang on just one second. We'll have you there. You know, I'm in a temporary location just for today, and so there's always something interesting going on, you know? But
Well,
why is it not?
we're riding to the sound of the battle of the guns. There's so much about to explode in this country, and we want to throw gasoline on every little spark and every little fire that they start igniting. And I think the biggest one is going to be next week. The Democrats don't realize that they're creating nuclear fusion, and I intend to fully exploit it.
Absolutely. Now, when you and I were talking earlier, just putting together different topics that we would be discussing today, we were talking about Robert Mueller's pending testimony before Congress. Obviously, Jeffrey Epstein, everybody's talking about that. We couldn't quite decide on what we were going to focus on, so we're talking about, boy, I tell you, the number of things that can go wrong. It always surprises me how there's no shortage of them, but I cannot get your image to appear here. That is so annoying. All kinds of crazy stuff going on. So we don't have your image, Scott. I apologize. I'm not sure how to rectify that now that we are live. But we were talking about the topics that we were going to discuss. And of course, we're talking about how could Robert Mueller, as the director of the FBI, not know about... Scott? That's not good. Okay, here we go. It's coming back. Oh, man. And now the way I've got this set up, oh, not being in my regular studio is so difficult. Okay. Okay. Scott?
Gotcha.
Got your back.
Gotcha.
I can't get the image to show here, and it's never done this before. The thing that we were talking about, Scott, is how could the director of the FBI not know that a billionaire pedophile in Florida was being tried and convicted, and this unprecedented deal between the Department of Justice through U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta and the local people there. We've just heard from Alexander Acosta the other day that he was told, they told him, hands off of Epstein, he's an intelligence asset. Is it possible that Robert Mueller didn't know about this?
No, it's impossible. The intelligence agencies and the military all work side by side. They all share the intel. It's a very closed, small community. Everyone's following the same language. They all really understand the same diet of information, and it's all known with each other. When I worked, I cross-pollinated, if you will, with CIA, with FBI, with DOJ, with State Department, with Defense Intelligence Agency, with their contractors as well, including British contractors. We were all in the, it was like a big, picnic. Everybody, brought a potluck, if you will. But everybody moved around and shared intel and stuff like that. So the whole notion of secrecy and compartmentalization really was never there. So, but what is there that the American people, I think, are starting to really wake up to because of Edward Snowden, because of the revelations of the NSA and the spying and all of the intel that originally came out, the American people are beginning to wake up and realize that the intelligence agencies are run amok. They're off the chain. They're in their own world. They think they are the wizard in the Wizard of Oz, where in fact they're little bureaucrats behind a curtain, and they're even uglier, and they're chain smokers, and they're divorced, and they're drinkers. I've seen them up close. I think they're some of the most reptilian, disgusting individuals I've ever come across. But the intelligence community and the agencies are now revealing themselves on a level connected to the most despicable behavior that human imagination will endure, and that is the sexual predation and the raping and the torment and the psychological scarring, the emotional, spiritual scarring and woundedness and destruction of young girls who are,
And boys.
and boys and boys who are under the age of 18. And I've studied this at Heritage, and I know all of the behavioral psychological factors. They're from broken families. The
victims are, or the perpetrators are.
The children that are targeted, they're always wounded. They're always psychologically traumatized. They're always coming from broken homes, broken families. There are always accelerants of alcohol or drugs. There's loneliness, there's pain, there's lack of trust because they've been betrayed. And they're susceptible to the predations of people like Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is starting to open up, and now it's entering, okay, when we mix in the intelligence agencies, now we're seeing the potential of foreign countries like Israel, Mossad, MI6, using predators and agents to develop sexual honey traps, we call them, for capturing lascivious, lustful, sexually devious and sexually addicted, sexual addicts like Bill Clinton, like Lindsey Graham, like others, to be entrapped in a sexually compromising position, and that's videotaped.
But Scott, doesn't it go beyond sexuality? Because when you see that picture of Jeffrey Epstein with the 12-year-old or 14-year-old, they got braces. They literally look like children. It's not like he's there with some girl who's too young for him, but, you know, I mean, these are children. How can someone be sexually attracted? It seems more like a violence, a domination. It doesn't seem like a sexual thing.
It's a purity. It's a penetration of purity. It's a devouring of the purity of the forbidden fruit, if you will. There's a psychology that's associated, and it is deviant. It is lustful. There's no. It's a cannibalistic, vampirish, parasitic will to consume the child and the innocence and the youthfulness and the lack of worldly exposure, the lack of worldly wisdom. Children under the age of 18, represent a bubble of purity, and that's what these predators go after.
Yeah,
it's not like
our viewers, Scott, are saying it's a satanic ritual thing.
Well,
none of that has been discussed really in the mainstream yet.
That's certainly part of it. That is certainly a pastime, an instrument, an activity that is associated not with all, but with a lot of it. I think that's what was coming out in the Podesta revelations and the cake and the videotape of the cake and these spirit cookings and all of these demonic, wicked activities that certainly are part of the body of evidence that should be brought forth. But with Epstein's arrest, and I think and I hope we're going to witness the full Niagara Falls thawing and pouring out everything. And let's see Weiner, let's see Uma Abedin, let's see Hillary Clinton, let's see Jeffrey Epstein, let's hear every single person that ever went to Epstein Island. Jan Bongino on Fox News, Secret Service guy, exposing Bill Clinton. How many little girls did Bill Clinton diddle and twaddle, and little boys?
Bongino was there when Clinton was there?
That was a report on Fox News, that Bongino was a Secret Service agent, and I think he had said he was going to reveal certain information about Bill Clinton in his participation. That may have been kept quiet.
What's he waiting for?
I don't know. Maybe he's trying to milk it. Most of these, a lot of these guys put up a good show like James Cagney, Jason, but when it comes to really serving and getting in, they hold stuff back, or they're afraid about losing their pension, or, they don't want to, Fox News, for a lot of good that it does, I think it's got a lot of bad also. They're hiring Donna Brazil and people like this. So I don't trust anybody. If you know something, you have a duty, if it's harming the American people or a violation of the Constitution or profiting off of corruption, you have a duty to make that known and prosecute and bring it forth to your members of the Senate, of the House, also prosecute it in court. That's where this is moving. I think with Mueller, and Epstein and all of these law enforcement practices and people that were in charge, I think it's all going to start coming out.
Well,
Donald
let's talk
Trump.
about that for a second, Scott, because
Yeah.
when we were talking before, and we were talking about Mueller testifying, Epstein being arrested, and I sort of just asked, is there a nexus between the two of them? And I wasn't even really sure, but the more we talk about it, as you say, there must be. Now, I apologize for the primitive nature of this. I don't know if you can see this. The screen share thing is not working, but I just started looking it up, and the first thing I found was from Media Matters, Scott, and it says far-right conspiracy theory that Robert Mueller is to blame for Jeffrey Epstein's prior sweetheart deal. And that makes the jump to Fox News. And you know what? When Media Matters categorizes it as a conspiracy theory, that's a pretty good bet that it's real.
Well, I wouldn't doubt it. We look at it. Was he tried in federal court? Was he tried in state court? Was it a federal charge?
Well, this is exactly what Acosta was addressing in his press conference the other day. It started out as a state charge, but then Acosta, as the U.S. attorney, got involved because what he said at the press conference was that that Epstein was not going to have to register as a sex offender, and he would have had no jail time. So with this deal that they came in with, according to Acosta, it was to ensure that Epstein would have to register as a sex offender and that he would spend some time in jail. But this angle of, did FBI Director Robert Mueller somehow influence that deal or push Acosta out front to do that deal? Scott, what's the relationship between the FBI Director and a U.S. attorney? They're both in the DOJ, but the FBI Director can't really direct a U.S. attorney, can he?
Well, the Department of Justice is responsible for prosecutions and filing indictments and going into court. The FBI can't do that. The FBI is simply responsible for investigations, the accumulation of evidence, and the presentation of that to the Department of Justice for execution in the courts. So Mueller really doesn't have any sway at all unless he is withholding evidence or classifying evidence. If he has said, you can't use this, it's an FBI federal matter, it involves intelligence agencies, whether for Israel or Britain or Mossad or other things, CIA, he could have classified and buried some of that stuff. That needs to come out, of course. If we're going to talk about Mueller and all of his shenanigans, as you know, Jason, we can follow Mueller right back to the origins of his entire career. You can see Mueller like footsteps of blood following from the 1990s in the Waco, Texas, where the Branch Davidians were slaughtered under Janet Reno, the rabid, crazy lesbian. You've got the Oklahoma City bombing situation. You've got, of course, 9/11, where Mueller came in a week before and confiscated all of the videotapes that would have disclosed that a 757 did not crash into the Pentagon, which confirms my experience the next day when I looked and there was no plane parts, no luggage, no wings, no tail, no engines anywhere on the Pentagon grass. It was like a golf course.
So let's talk more about this, though, because Mueller is now, they're pushing him to go before Congress to talk about the ridiculous and fake Russia investigation. I mean, the one investigation that they actually want Robert Mueller to do is into absolute nonsense. All the investigations that he did not do are the investigations that we actually need.
Yes. Yes, that's a very good point. All of the investigations that he did, he failed. He refused to do the 9/11. He covered it up. The 9/11 was probably the greatest false flag cover-up in the history of humanity, and it really warrants going back and trying and prosecuting and executing everybody who played a part in that. And I, of course, have always said the military, the members of the military at the Pentagon that stuck their heads out the window and walked out the door and looked on the grass and said, there's no plane parts anywhere. There's a big hole, but it wasn't a plane. Every single military person and contractor that came out, but particularly the military, are guilty of treason and should be prosecuted and executed for that. Because when you wear that uniform and you swear an oath, you are above politics. You're for defending the Constitution against foreign and domestic enemies. The people of this country expected you to be Captain America, and instead you sold them like a bowl of cold pottage. Every American military person that was in the Pentagon during that attack is guilty of treason if they knew that this was false. And we've had 19 years of war because of that. That was Mueller. It was also a lot of other people there. That needs to be brought out. I'd like to see next week when they have Mueller brought in, besides the current investigation that was a complete failure, there was no Russia collusion, there was no Russia hoax. We're now seeing people again putting together the dots. When you say that there's Russian FSB and these Russian agencies and Russian computer companies, you don't have any links to Putin. You don't have any links to the FSB. You don't have anything except speculation. So this entire Mueller report is fantastical speculation of connecting the dots, but really you're not connecting any dots. You're moving dots into conveniently close locations where you can then make the connections. Well, those dots were never that close. They were spread out all over. And in fact, when you let the evidence fall together, it paints a different picture, and that is that the weaponization of the intelligence agencies, the FBI, the Department of Justice, were all conceived and organized and manipulated in order to generate a hostility environment against Donald Trump, trying to remove him. That's when they're also going to be asking Mueller about, well, you knew that there was no Russian collusion before the midterm elections of last year, but yet you kept it going through the midterm elections of last year because you politically calculated that this would contribute to the demise of the Republican Party power. And that's part of what it did. Trump also, I think, brought this on with his continuing down the warmongering path with Bolton and Pompeo and these other idiots. Nobody wants these conflicts and wars, and that was seen as an act of hypocrisy by Trump.
Yeah.
And he lost the House, I think, because of it. But Mueller is going to be grilled on these things, and I think he's going to fall apart at the seams. This is the first time to kick that guy right in the cojones, to punch him in the mouth. And I hope there are members of Congress that will say, I've got, 3 minutes, Mr. Mueller, and I'm going to ask you one thing. You know that 9/11 was covered up and the cameras were covered up and you confiscated them. You didn't let them know. You didn't tell the American public that there was no plane on the Pentagon. Why not, Mr. Mueller? What are you hiding? I want to see that right now. And don't tell me I have to refer to any prior reports. I'm asking you right now. They need to ask that question. They also need to ask about this whole Russiagate scandal and Brennan and everything we've seen on the Epoch Times and the Spygate.
Let me keep you on 9/11 for a second, Scott, because this is one of the biggest issues, I think, for anyone who was alive then and even now. We've heard a lot about the Israeli operatives who were driving a moving van or a painting van or something like that, who were captured. They were there photographing the event. They had foreknowledge of the event. Mm-hmm. So the FBI knew that, I don't know that it's clear to what extent these guys were Mossad agents, Mossad assets, whatever. But so there's some communication between the FBI and Mossad. They let those guys go. I didn't see a trial of those guys.
Michael Chertoff let them go. And let's be real, Michael Chertoff, it's been said he's a dual Israeli citizen. So
how do we know that? I want to know. How can we find out? We've heard from Cynthia McKinney in a very nervous voice. She didn't sound confident in what she was saying on an interview in Iranian television where she said that members of Congress are forced to sign a pledge to Israel. I've never seen that pledge. I've never seen anybody else refer to it other than that interview. While I appreciate that there may, in fact, be individuals with dual citizenship, I don't like putting that out there unless we know it. Michael Chertoff is a bad guy, whether he's in America, Israel, or whatever. And I'm glad you brought that up because it also ties to Michael Hayden. And Michael Hayden was the NSA director. He was the CIA director. And Kevin Shipp has brought up Michael Hayden in this research that Kevin has been doing into the Hammer.
Michael Hayden was a Booz Allen Hamilton guy, too.
Exactly.
Booz Allen Hamilton guy.
Mary Fanning has blown a gasket over this. We're looking into this, and it seems like Michael Hayden is a really interesting person in this whole series of events, and there's not enough scrutiny on him. So there is a connection between Robert Mueller, knowledge at least of Mossad activity, and we've got this, how effectively can somebody like Robert Mueller operate behind the scenes, Scott, in terms of...
Very easily, Jason. That's why they call it the swamp. That's why it's called incestuousness, because in Washington, D.C., you have, in Northern Virginia, you have a very small community, in Maryland, too. You've got people who converge into Washington and work in the Pentagon, work in the agencies and the contractors, and work in the different agencies, State Department, CIA, and elsewhere. They're all in the same cocktail hour, cigar smoking socials and all this stuff. It really is an incestuous carnival, and it's easy to cross pollinate and recognize. Everybody starts talking the same language. It's a very close knit group of people, even if you don't know each other. Right. The military's all over there. You've got, Fort McNair, Fort Myer.
So when Alexander Acosta says they told me that Epstein was an intelligence asset, who's the they?
Well, that's a good question, because now we're drilling down, because you can say it's either someone at DIA, someone at State Department, someone at CIA, someone at FBI. You have about all the agencies that the Director of National Intelligence now oversees. And Obama basically, what Obama did when he allowed all of the raw intelligence sharing to be shared by all the agencies, he basically broke the piñata and dumped all the candy for everybody to go in and change wrappers, right? The toffee is now put into a Hershey's wrapper, and all that. That was the whole purpose of keeping it separate, so you could have the intel from different agencies not corrupted or abused by other agencies. So when he says, "Well, they told me," hold on. The intelligence agencies are very, very limited. We're not talking about Health and Human Services. We're not talking about the Department of Education. There could be a component of the Department of Homeland Security. There's a component at CIA, DIA, military, Navy, the Office of Naval Intelligence. They all have their own. But who did it, Mr. Acosta?
Yeah.
Now, Acosta, I think, is a piece of garbage. And
Why do you say that?
It was funny, Jason. We saw him on Friday last week when President Trump was giving his 4th of July speech. Here's that big, ugly SOB Acosta standing right behind Donald Trump. The day before that pedophile Epstein was arrested. Was that a symbol? Was that a note? Was that a message? Maybe.
Well, did you see the Acosta press conference the other day?
No, I did not.
I think you should watch it, Scott, because he said a lot of interesting things. He answered a lot of hard questions, and he answered them in a way that surprised me. I would say on Monday or Tuesday, I would be right with you on this. But after that press conference, my eyes were opened to some of the things that Mr. Acosta said. He was talking about the complexity of the case. He was talking about how it was a state charge that was initially brought against Epstein in 2008, and that the U.S. attorney intervened, and that this never happens, and they did that because the state charge would have prevented Epstein from being forced to register as a sex offender and would have gotten him no jail time, and that when they intervened, he's registered as a sex offender. Now, the impression that I got from watching the press conference was that we might not have Jeffrey Epstein incarcerated right now if it wasn't for the work that Alexander Acosta's team did back then. I think it's also important to remember that the fake news likes to spin this into Alexander Acosta did everything. But what Acosta presented was letters from other prosecutors in his office, some of which were women, talking about their frustration with the system.
Yeah.
You've got to keep in mind they're prosecuting a billionaire who has essentially unlimited legal resources. They want to avoid an O.J. Simpson scenario where the guy gets off and then now he's gone and out of trouble forever. So I am starting to have a little bit of an open mind to what Mr. Acosta's role might be. Perhaps Donald Trump spoke to him and said, "What the hell is going on with Jeffrey Epstein? You let him go." Maybe Acosta told him, "Well, hey, it's this Robert Mueller or whoever it is that told me to leave him alone, and I had no choice. My hands were tied."
Yeah,
I want to know who they was.
Yeah, that's a good subject that could bring in Mueller and really again dissect him in the way that he deserves, because there's obviously a legal ground for examining everything that Mueller did or participated in that are notoriously and odiously compromised and sickeningly corrupt, from his hiring of Jenny Rhee, the lawyer that represented Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation. So Jenny Rhee knew about all of the Clinton Foundation money and the pay to play and the bribes from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the money that went to Bill Clinton and the signatures from the State Department, Hillary Clinton giving gun licenses and weapons this. And then we saw of course, Libya and Syria and Ukraine. So Ginny Rhee and the Clinton Foundation, and again, Covington and Burling, the law firm that represented these countries and these banks that were involved in pay to play, and the Covington and Burling lawyer Rob Kellner, who sidled up and snuck in and represented Michael Flynn, that Michael Flynn is now fired because all of the revelations of Kellner and Covington and Burling, which Sidney Powell is bringing, all of this is I think, shattering and bringing them all down and revealing all that they're involved with. And Mueller had a part of that. Mueller was, so was Comey up to his neck and all that. So what I think we're going to see with Mueller is he's going to be questioned next Thursday or Wednesday. He's going to be questioned on all of the corruption that was done and the obvious, abuse of President Trump, the obvious political calculations that were put forth, the obviously compromising situation with Bruce Orr, Nellie Orr, Fusion GPS.
Let's stay on Barr for a second, because it's just come out that William Barr's father hired Jeffrey Epstein to work as a mathematics teacher at the Dalton School, which is an incredibly elite prep school, sort of like a high school in New York City. Have you heard anything about that?
Probably because Epstein gave money. Let's not forget, if you're a predator, you're going to give a few $1 million to a school in exchange for a teaching opportunity in order to, gain access to some of these young kids. That's how that's done. That's why it's done.
But if it's true that William Barr's father hired Jeffrey Epstein, that is a very unusual.
Well, it smells, and it's ugly, and it's like, Jesus God, this really is the swamp? What the hell why are you all mixed in and touching each other?
Right. I mean, well, I'm sorry that I can't share the screen and with the audience and everything. We're just having a little technical problem today. But I just Googled right now, Barr father hire Epstein. The first 3 returns I have are a Newsweek article from 3 days ago that says William Barr says he's recused himself from the Epstein case over a legal conflict. And then there's a Forbes article from 2 days ago that says Barr won't recuse himself from the Epstein sex trafficking case. And then MSNBC says Bill Barr's father was enabling Epstein, according to the home of Rachel Maddow.
Well, they're going to try and politically propagandize this against Trump. That's their general strategy. So they're going to do everything they can to make everybody that's associated with Trump look like a corruption, a scumbag, a child predator. And they're going to throw Epstein, of course, and say he's really a Republican. Epstein is close to Trump. They're going to do everything they can to try and make Trump look like a predator and everybody else a predator. That's the Democrat way. That's why they're still harking on this. The Russians, the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. They're putting up ads on Facebook about Black Lives Matter and all this. Well, was that tied to Putin? Yes. Well, where's the proof? There is no proof. And when did you know that there was no Russian proof? Oh, way back in 2016, 2017. And you kept it going until 2019? Well, yeah, we wanted to impeach Trump. We wanted to make a negative. We wanted to drive him crazy. So all of these motives are going to be brought out. I think people are going to question, and I hope they question Mueller with a ferocity and a mercilessness and a moral outrage that this country has never seen by members of Congress. Because there's nothing warranting more of an outrage and I'm tired of seeing these members of Congress sit down and ask questions. I want to see them stand up out of their desk and lean over it and go, I'm talking to you, Mr. Mueller. You have fouled this country. You have disgustingly misrepresented the agency. You try to throw out an American president. I want to see them get so mad that neck veins bulge, their faces turn red, they start throwing stuff down on the ground. I want to see the full passion and glory of an outraged politician for the first time in the history of the country against someone who tried to overthrow the president. That is Mueller. That is all of these Democrat people that he hired to be his investigators. We've seen them go after, Corsi, the old guy. We've seen them go after Roger Stone. Well, how come you didn't go after Julian Assange, Mr. Mueller? You lying son of a... Yeah, you didn't go and meet with Assange. You didn't go to Britain. You didn't go sit down with him and interrogate him. Why? Because you didn't want to know the truth? You didn't want to know other things you'd have to include in your report? Yeah, you didn't want to include that because Assange would have said the same thing to you that he told Sean Hannity. The Russians were not our source. Who
Right.
was the source? Seth Rich, someone else, both, two, who knows? All of these things, Mueller, if he was really representing the American people, he would have done these things, but he didn't do them, Jason, because he wasn't representing the American people. He was representing himself. He was representing the swamp. He was
Yeah.
representing his hermaphroditic Democrat, liberal, leftist, communist constituency that lost the election.
Uh-huh.
That's where Trump really needs to, and I think he's doing it with the Inspector General report, with Barr, but he needs to really get bloody. He needs to take off the gloves because he needs to, of course, carry this through to 2020. But they need to savage Mueller. He needs to be the pinata. He needs to be the little chihuahua that all of the great Dobermans and shepherd dogs and pit bulls of the American Republicans tear him to pieces.
Yes,
I mean,
and
shatter the
Scott,
man.
Agent 99 has read my mind in the comments here, and my next question was going to be, when are you running for Congress? Because I want to see veins bulging and stuff being thrown down, and we need Scott Bennett in Congress to do that.
I may be running against Desaulniers when I prosecute that son of a bitch. I won't say it on the internet because I want to get bleeped by the fag YouTube channel, but I may be going after Desaulniers' seat after I throw him in a courtroom and say, you covered up terrorist financing and you're not worthy and you should be impeached. Same with Donald Shalala and all these other people. So this is a time for morally outraged people to be rising up and saying, we can't endure this society, this country is not going to last long when we have these metrosexual Ken dolls running our government, running our Congress. Look what we have with Mueller, this piece of garbage. And look, Jason, you and I and your audience, a few people, we're like the age that can go back to 9/11 and remember it. I mean, I was in my late 20s. I was doing my master's. Actually, I finished my master's. I was doing my PhD. I just started up at my PhD when 9/11 hit, and I didn't connect that there was no plane. I didn't connect that until I was thrown in prison and had the time of quiet and reflection, and it blows my mind. But that's how powerful the PSYOP was, because they incorporated the National Cathedral, the Amazing Grace, the organ, the pipes, all the nostalgia about Americana. It diluted, it inebriated Americans psychologically, and it got them on the war footing for the next 20 years. Now, with the internet, and we're coming out, we're going, wait a minute, what this? But here's what we're seeing too. As more and more of us wake up and start really getting loud, the Facebook, the Twitter, the YouTube are shutting us down. Look at Laura Loomer. She just filed, what, a $3 billion lawsuit?
$3 billion. I can't wait to barbecue at her new Malibu mansion once she wins that lawsuit. Now, speaking of the internet, Scott, the internet seems to have put a crimp on your connection. Your audio quality just went down a notch, and your picture is very broken up. I don't understand why that's happening, but it's going to be interesting when we see Mr. Mueller in Congress next week. Now, hasn't Bill Barr also done a little bit of a flip-flop of some kind as far as whether or not he's going to block or somehow prevent this Robert Mueller testimony?
Well, I don't know. I can't see him. Barr can't do anything to stop Mueller from testifying because Congress is a co-equal branch of government. So Congress can call anybody they want in. They can always plead the fifth, but they have to. I don't. Maybe they can not show up and just say, no, I'm not going to show up. If you want to, talk to me, talk to my lawyer. But Congress can call him to testify, and I think he will. I think Mueller. Mueller is one of the most disgusting, horrible, just criminals.
Traitorous.
And I mean, the LaRouche Institute did a good study on Mueller. You can Google it, the LaRouche Institute. I've got it buried here somewhere. I've read it. And they do a historical analysis of the history of Mueller from the 80s and the 90s and what we see now. And he's very virulently anti-Trump. He's very deep state. But he needs to be called upon it. He needs to be prosecuted for it. I'd love to see this Epstein thing unfold all of the theoretical proclamations that people have been making about, the indictments and the sexual predators and the podesta and all the sexual pedophilia that people have been kind of ruling about, the background noise. Well, great. If there's an opportunity to do it, let's do it with Mueller. Let's do it with Epstein. Let's draw out Epstein. This whole sexual pedophilia thing that people have been talking about, Abedin and Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and there's a video allegedly of Hillary Clinton and Abedin killing like some little girl in some sexual deviant witch-like activity, which may or may not be true. I'd like to think everything deviant, disgusting, and sexually debaucherous about the Democrats are true, so that we can hang them by the neck until they're dead and shoot them in a firing squad.
Calm down a little bit here. We don't want to promote any kind of violent stuff. We want people to be brought to justice. We want people to be brought to justice. Now, so Scott, someone's here in the comments talking about Cynthia McKinney made this comment on Iranian television about a loyalty pledge that members of Congress must sign. Have we ever seen this loyalty pledge, and we ever heard anyone other than a nervous Cynthia McKinney sort of sputter that out on Iranian television with no evidence whatsoever? Is there a loyalty pledge that they sign?
I've never seen something in document. The only thing I could surmise or I could guess is that perhaps when people are elected, they have AIPAC or others say, we'll raise money for you if you promise to always support Israel or something like that. Something general. I don't know. That could be something. But having signed a pledge, that could be it too. But I've never seen it. But if you, I think I've heard rumblings about if you don't sign that or agree to it, then they won't raise money for you and they won't support you. They'll push you out. That may be it. But you know what? When we serve our country, we serve for the Constitution of the United States. We serve for the American people.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to talk about powerful lobbying groups, and I'm sure we would disagree with the agendas of many of them. Certainly if it turns out that Jeffrey Epstein is in fact a Mossad asset who's doing all this stuff to compromise U.S. politicians and U.S. businesses, and if Israeli secret intelligence is doing that, that's a substantial act of aggression against the United States.
If I was running an intelligence operation agency, I would do exactly that. I mean, if I had, if you're involved in really black operations and hardcore, I mean, really, really brutal stuff, that's the way to do it. You go and you get the sexually lustful, the sexually susceptible Lindsey Grahams or others, and you rope them into a brownstoning situation. You drug some kids. You get Dick Cheney. You get these other people. You get them in so they can't say no. You videotape them. Now we've got you. And that's the wise way to do it. That's the smart way.
Drugging kids and raping them is wise.
I mean, we have to be real politics. Look, we're talking military operations. We're talking Red Sparrow stuff. It's not pretty.
What is Red Sparrow?
People get killed. They had a Soviet Union situation back in the 80s where they had girls that were recruited to penetrate the U.S. embassy diplomatic relations in Europe using female sexual lures to try and get access to, U.S. intelligence and stuff like that. It had a whole operation. The Chinese do it too. The Chinese have a whole they're even more dangerous because they really see all of their people as two-dimensional, and there is no word for freedom in Chinese. And when you look at what they do to the Falun Gong and the Falun Dafa, origin harvesting, slave labor, if Americans knew what the Chinese really do, they would have nothing to do with China. They wouldn't buy shoes. They wouldn't buy, $1 jackets. They would say no because I'm contributing to the murder and the torture and the horrific treatment of people in China. This is all slave labor.
I think people would still buy iPhones, though.
Well, they could when they. And that's the sad part. That's also where we're. What's more important, a dollar iPhone or the guy who's going to make that iPhone and be dead at the end of the day?
Jumping out the window into a net.
Well, that's I mean, that's the Asian Chinese mentality, and I we'll see what happens with that. But what we see with currently with this Mueller congressional hearing, Barr, the Inspector General, the collapsing of the deep state, and the prosecuting of all of this, it needs to be accelerated. And I personally, I really don't like Trey Gowdy, because I remember when they were doing the Benghazi hearings, I called Trey Gowdy, all these guys, and I said, look, you cannot have an investigation into Benghazi unless you look at September 11th, 2012, in which Brad Birkenfeld was paid off $104 million on the very same day as Benghazi, because it was a black operation for terrorist funding that involved UBS, State Department, Hillary Clinton, and all these other things. You're going to have Hillary Clinton up there, you at least ask her a question. Ms. Clinton, isn't it true that you and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Loretta Lynch conspired to throw Brad Birkenfeld in prison, and then you also agreed to pay him $104 million for silence on the same day that you launched the Benghazi deception operation? Don't you remember that name? Don't you remember that account? Don't you remember Jesselyn Raddick, the same lawyer that represented Edward Snowden? Don't you remember Edward Snowden was targeting this guy, Brad Birkenfeld, in the CIA in Bern, Switzerland? I told Gowdy's people all of this stuff to throw it all up on the wall and see what stuck. And Gowdy did nothing. So I'd like to see that SOB also brought up. I don't have any mercy for any of these people, because it's not about political advancement. It's about the Constitution. It's about crimes. It's about terrorist financing. It's about all of this filthy stuff that these bastards knew about, and they did nothing, including Jason Chaffetz. He was one of the first people that I wrote. Him and Saxby Chambliss, they did nothing. Now, I know I get passionate about it because I lived it. I breathed it. This was in my veins. It was like that scene from The Abyss when Sam Harris drops down to the bottom of the ocean and he's got that liquid oxygen that he's breathing in his lungs. I've been breathing.
Let me take you back. Let me take you back to the Israel story, because someone is asking: isn't Netanyahu trying to indict Ehud Barak, who was the leader of the IDF and very involved with Mossad? I don't know that much about Israel politics. What's going on over there with Netanyahu and?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I would only surmise that this has something to do with Netanyahu's flare-firing operations to avoid the missiles that are coming out as exhaust pipe, with regards to the things that he was doing with his wife and finance irregularities. That could be part of it. Netanyahu is doing some strange things, creating, a settlement in the Golan Heights and calling it Trump Heights or Trump. They're equating this stuff to Trump. Trump is, I think, going this way because of Sheldon Adelson and a lot of the money they've given him. But I don't think it's going to be winning him much. Netanyahu is I think, trying to goad the United States into a conflict with Iran, and I'm very wary of that because I don't think the American people are going to support that. I think if one ship or one plane of Americans gets killed or shot down because of Trump's allowing to be drawn into this sort of conflict, honestly, I think he could be done.
Doesn't it seem like so far Trump has been playing expert brinksmanship with Iran?
Well, he has, and I think his activity with a North Korean, entering into North Korea, was probably one of the best diplomatic actions that an American president had ever taken.
I thought it was great.
It was fabulous. It was absolutely fabulous. Now, it's funny because he did exactly with North Korea what I was telling him to do with the Iranians. I was telling the Iranians to do that very thing. Establish a relationship with Donald Trump. Right. Recognize he doesn't want anything with Barack Obama. And see if you can come together. See if you can have a relationship. Well, there's a lot of pride. There's a lot of, ancient history and this and that. And, it's just been clashed. So Trump turned and engaged North Korea and engaged their concept of saving face and stuff people have talked about. And guess what? He's got a deal. He's got a new little nephew named Kim Jong-un, who's full of life and smiles, and you can see that he's warm to President Trump. So I think North Korea is a done deal. I think it's like, great, let's have our Hilton hotels and surf clubs, and I think, it's going to be a matter of time, maybe, 5-10 years, but I think North Korea is a done deal.
I want
And
to
he
tell you
did
something
exact-
real quick, Scott. I just Googled before the show because these are all the topics you and I were talking about earlier today, and I was, putting stuff together. I Googled Trump, North Korea, and we get articles. I'm sorry that the screen sharing is not working right now, but the first article comes up is from the New York Times, says Trump's Asia gamble shatter enduring strategies on China and North Korea. That's sort of lukewarm. Then we had NBC News saying, well, there was one here just a minute ago that said Trump's North Korea policy is a failure. And then right next to it, it said Trump's policies on Iran, North Korea, and Russia are cleaning up messes by Obama. This is NBC News. I'm surprised to hear them say anything positive about Trump.
Well, they're I think lying through their teeth as the habitual liars that they are. Michael Isikoff.
No, but this is positive. It's saying his policies are cleaning up messes left by Obama, Bush, and Clinton.
Well, North Korea, Trump is a victory, and all the Democrat Party people have been hating that. They've hated Trump for that. They've hated North Korea. They've tried to make him look like, the chief vampire. You shouldn't be talking to him. The president's not supposed to be talking or any of that.
Right.
You don't have a damn clue what you're talking about. The president is the only man in America that has the charisma and the power and the whole personality for deal making. And isn't that what we're trying to do? Now, he's done it wrong with, I think, Ron. I don't like what he's done with Russia, but of course we understand that he had to do certain things because the Republicans pushed him that way. Newt Gingrich pushed him that way. They were all going apeshit crazy when it went over to Helsinki and met with the Russians. And they said, you've got to be tough and you've got to beat up the Russians and all this. And let's never forget, Putin said, hey, bring over your whole Department of Justice team and you can investigate till you're blue in the face everybody in Russia, and you'll find out we had nothing to do with any of this. In fact, you can bring in Browder, the billionaire who brought all this money out of Russia and gave it to the Clinton people, the Clinton campaign.
Got called out by Putin.
Another thing. So Korea's been successful. Iran has not been successful because you have a lot of pride. Iran has a lot of pride. Yes, you have the Mueller, the mullah, the religious aristocracy or hierarchy. You've had the Islamic Revolution. They're trying to keep a conservative society together. I can understand some of their sensitivities to the far left social decay that we see in America and transvestite, transgender, gay parades, gay teaching in schools to kids that are causing the conservative impulses in all people, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or something in between. They don't like their kids getting transvestites going to public libraries looking like some demonized, monstrosity from Halloween, coming and talking to their kids about this stuff. So they're trying to preserve their society in a sense.
See, you and I share certain. I agree that transgenderism being taught to small children is not something that I agree with. But I think that adults who want to engage in a homosexual lifestyle, that's their right to do that. I want them to have the right to do that. I agree. It's problematic to, in my opinion, expose young children to that library scenario. You showed me the article. It's just, I don't think, beneficial to kids. But talk a bit about Robert Maxwell, Scott. Do you know much about him, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the close associate of Epstein, the madam, as it were?
Vaguely. I'm not too. If it was one of his lieutenants or his recruiters or his minions that.
Well, Ghislaine Maxwell was his like second in command. I'm very curious as to why she hasn't been named in this indictment. People have speculated that she might be being a state's witness. Rainbow 777 says that Marc Desaulniers is in the congressional district there, and this person's been banging on the comments for me to tell them where you live. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, no. I mean, the war is coming, and Desaulniers and Feinstein and Spears and all California has been in meltdown. So, libertarian, conservative, Republican, the Republican Party in California is really just a mess, but. I think independence, conservative. If I ran, I would run as an independent, as a conservative independent, because I think that's the way of the future. To say, you know what, I'm tired of all the party and all this stuff. I've always been a conservative Republican, but this modern Republican Party in the GOP in California is just Democrat light. No, I'm a conservative, unapologetic, independent Republican conservative, and I would run against everybody just based on family values. And exposing the whistleblowing corruptions that we've seen in our government, ending war. I'd be very similar to Tulsi Gabbard. I wouldn't embrace the far left social agendas. I would stick to the conservative agendas, and I would shrink government as low as possible. And I would go to, the right to keep and bear arms is sacrosanct, and government agencies need to be seriously kept under control. We've suffered as a society because we've lost our own responsibility, our independence, and we've crippled ourselves with this. But
well, Scott, cynical boomer is saying that California is totally gone, and isn't it? Did I see that? What's his name? Gavin Newsom just passed a law that they're going to be giving free medical insurance to undocumented individuals, illegal immigrants, whatever. Well, what about all the homeless people in San Francisco? What about Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles? Why don't they give free medical care to those people who are already in America rather than flooding the country with more destitute people that the rest of us, there's limited resources. It's not a matter of being anti-immigration. I mean, we've got real people in need here in this country, and we're talking about adding to that problem. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, I was just in San Francisco yesterday for Ellen Zhao, who's running for mayor of San Francisco. She's a Chinese conservative lady. Ellen Zhao for mayor 2019. Her website is, you can Google it. And I think I've got her. Yeah. So here's her poster, Ellen Zhao for mayor. And she's a firebrand. She went in yesterday and she said to the GOP party in San Francisco, "You are all worthless. I don't want your endorsement. You're failures. You haven't elected a Republican in 50 years. You're all losers." And she's got the Chinglish, right? The broken Chinese accent. She's like Wu Chao Zhani from the Hawaiians. "You're all losers." And it was hilarious. And they're just in shock. And here's this little Chinese lady who is as tough as nails, who's running. Now, see, that's the future of California, too, are the minorities. The Asians, the Vietnamese, the Chinese, the Hindus.
Homeless veterans. What about homeless veterans? Why isn't California taking care of homeless veterans before we start bringing other people who don't even live here into the country to add to the homeless problem or the welfare problem?
When I was driving by San Francisco, you have people standing up sticking needles in their arms. I'll send you a video that I took. I mean, people are actually standing there, putting this, these poor souls.
Heroin, meth, what is that?
Well, I don't know. They're putting something in hell. It could be whatever. But these poor souls, tents are all over the place. They're just coming apart at the seams.
Yeah.
And it's all because...
Well, and it's scary. It's because, there's parts of downtown Los Angeles. When I went to the Patreon conference in September, it was in downtown Los Angeles, and I was walking somewhere, I forget where, and I was like, pretty intimidated. There's entire blocks filled with tents of homeless people. It's like you remember the movie Escape from New York? It's like a post-apocalyptic.
Right.
We've just abandoned that section of Los Angeles, and we want to give health insurance to people who don't even live here.
Well,
and
they're getting you're getting the bubonic plague. You're getting not syphilis. You're getting typhus. You're getting all these diseases that come from poor sanitary conditions.
Right.
And it's a terrible thing. Tucker Carlson was talking a little bit about Trump about it, but I think California is slowly imploding. I'd like to see really real leaders rise up, but it's a battle. The socialism that they've been pushing in California is remarkable.
Kelly is telling us that China owns California.
Yeah,
there was definitely when I was leaving Hollywood, China was coming in. There was a big push, and I remember there was an article in Variety that I saw that I can't remember what studio it was, but they were having a really big problem getting the money out of China for their movies.
Yeah. Well, the Chinese studios, I think, and their whole propaganda machine is designed to, really infiltrate and get California. The Chinese flags are all over San Francisco. The Chinese Communist Party's in San Francisco.
Wow.
I think it's going to be rolled back though, because you've got, again, the minority population that left Cambodia, left Vietnam, came over here for freedom. Now you're having that taken away. I think they're going to stand up against that. I think they're going to reverse it. But getting back to the long-term agenda, Trump's got North Korea. He needs to be aware of Iran. He needs to be aware of Russia, and he needs to be aware of China and Turkey, because now they're all consolidating. Now Russia does not want to go with China against the United States. Putin has said that. Putin has said China is the big danger. China is the threat. Putin said that in 2000 and it was 7 or 8 to a business meeting of Cargo Lux and international business, European businesses. He went over to Germany or something. So Putin's heart is for Europe and Western values, conservative Western values, as Russia is. They don't want to open up to a lot of the toxicity that the West has culturally, but his heart is in favor of positive relations with the United States, and I think Donald Trump is too. So this is now a time between now and 2020. Here's the other thing, Jason. Donald Trump needs to fire Pompeo, fire Bolton, fire Gina Haspel, get new people like Senator Dick Black. He needs to be brought in and be made either the NSA guy or the Pentagon chief. He needs to bring in Tulsi Gabbard. She's not going to win the Democrat nominee, and I'm very glad for that, because she could threaten Donald Trump and give him a run for his money if she did get the nomination. But Donald Trump needs to bring Tulsi Gabbard into his administration in some capacity, whether as the UN representative. She's far better than Nikki Haley. But bring in Tulsi Gabbard, bring in Dick Black, bring in General Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn is going to be exonerated. He's going to be as mad as a hornet. He's going to be like a Scotty dog looking for a rat to kill. Well, let's make
in our last few minutes, Scott, talk about that. What have you heard? Have you been speaking with Sidney Powell? Have you spoken with anybody in the Flynn family? What's the latest update? I saw that Sidney had entered a motion to terminate they were referring to Michael Flynn in this case that they're trying to implicate his son in as an unindicted co-conspirator, and Sidney Powell had entered a motion to stay that. What do we know about what's going on?
I don't want to undermine Sidney's advances, but I can say that she knows where all the bodies are buried. She knows where all the documents are. She knows all the stories. She knows the timeline. She knows everything about Michael Flynn. She knows everything about the terrorist financing, Brad Birkenfeld shell game. She knows Mattis. She knows Covington and Burling. She knows Robert Kellner, the lawyer, working with Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, all Covington and Burling people. So they were compromised. They had no right to represent Michael Flynn. They kept from Michael Flynn key information which would have prevented him from hiring them, because they were implicated in the crimes that Michael Flynn was exposing. So they committed fraud on their client. They committed fraud on the court. They all should be disbarred. Sidney is going to bring a lot of this stuff forth. It's going to result, I think, in another reverse investigation. Remember, Mueller and all this stuff is blown up. Covington and Burling, Michael Flynn, the spying on Mike Flynn to cover up the Clinton terrorist financing, pay-to-play operations is at the heart of the Covington and Burling existence. So it's going to invert it, turn it upside down, put Michael Flynn on the counterattack and say, this whole crime, this whole charge of making a false statement, I'm retracting my plea, and I'm asking the court to throw out everything because it's fruit of the poisonous tree. They should not have done it, and in fact, they did it because it leads back. Let's go in reverse. Lead back from Oz to the beginning of the Yellow Brick Road, and we'll go back to the Lilliputian, or what do they call the Munchkin Land? Yeah. We're going to go from Oz back to the Munchkin Land, and we're going to see Hillary Clinton and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Loretta Lynch. We're going to see Covington and Burling. We're going to see all these people conspiring to try and turn this country into a wheel of fortune, but they lost because Donald Trump was elected. And their whole world imploded in 2016, and they've been desperate to throw out as much smoke as they can to try and hope that they can hide in the shadows or they can escape. No, they can't. The light is coming down on them, and everybody, I mean, Barr is very methodical. I like him because he plays the bagpipes. Any guy who plays the bagpipes, Scotland the Brave, okay, he's got something good in him. So I think he's gonna continue to peel this back.
Yeah. So real quickly, there's a lot of people putting comments in about what's going on with Michael Flynn, and I can see that there were some developments today. The Washington Times is reporting that Michael Flynn's attorney says they've uncovered crucial and troubling issues in the case.
Oh, yeah.
I have no doubt in that. Attorneys
we know
for
what they
former,
are, don't we, Jason?
yeah, right. It's that the prosecutors were liars.
Look, it's a poker game. We're letting them put down one card at a time, and we're watching these bastards go nervous, fall apart, shit their pants, beg for mercy, make a plea deal. It's all coming because we know what they did, we know when they did it, we know how they did it. We've got the bank accounts, we've got the intelligence assets. And it's all beginning to be exposed. So Sidney Powell and Michael Flynn are attacking along a certain vector. Barr and the Inspector General and the Mueller exposure and Rosenstein and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and Fusion GPS and everybody that was part of this, including Veselnitskaya and all that stuff that they were trying to talk about. Trump is going to come out. Michael is going to come out. I'm going to love to be testifying against Michael Isikoff.
Will you testify in the Flynn case? Is there going to be a trial? Will you testify in anything? Not the Flynn case. Where are you going to testify against Isikoff?
Well, I'll testify in every capacity that harms and hurts the Democrat, leftist, communist, Hillary Clinton menagerie of ugliness. I will destroy them with a glee and a delight that human beings rarely experience.
Right. Dark Horse comments that Sidney Powell is kicking in. I think that's right. It's Sidney Powell taking over for Covington and Burling is absolutely what we needed, absolutely what the Flynn family needed. And I really feel, Scott, that the tide has turned, the worm has turned, something has turned. You know, when that Mueller investigation shut down, it really felt like Donald Trump has his hands on the wheel now. This Epstein arrest, there's going to be, I think, an unprecedented investigation. We saw Bill Clinton come out right away with a statement that quite obviously is false, or as Charles Ortel would say, at least materially misleading. It's very reminiscent of his "I did not have sex with that woman, what's your definition of is" comment. And why would anyone trust Bill Clinton? He was impeached for lying under oath. People forget that. And I think he's lying again now.
He raped Wiley. He raped all sorts of women. Let me get this, Jason, real quick. Everybody who's watching this show and you should take the link, call their representative, call the senators and say to the staffer, I have intelligence. I need to get to you before the Mueller testimony. What is your email, intern? I need to get this to you now. And get this link to the show to them and put them on notice. Be advised, you're hereby given notice that there's a lot of intelligence that needs to be asked. And I'm giving you this link. I'm telling you to watch it. I'm recording that I talked to you on this day at this time. That's how people can get in the fight, is get scrappy, get in the faces, make the call and say, you know. Well,
can you and I go to the hearing, Scott, and shout things at Mueller as he enters or exits? Like,
they can.
Why don't you come to D.C.? Let's you and I go to the hearing. Oh, you can't.
Well,
right. Sorry. No, I know you can't. You can't. I got it. Well, Scott, listen, it's been a very energetic interview. I know everybody is pleased to see you back. I really apologize that the screen switching wasn't working. I set all this stuff up and then it crapped out at the last minute. But, you know, you and I have been trying to do a regular Thursday show. I know you've got a lot of stuff going on over there, and I've got stuff going on that sometimes precludes it. But we will be back with you next Thursday. We'll be probably back at the regular time. Anything you want to say in closing before we wrap it up?
I think just people get in the fight, make the call, send the links, and get bold and get fiery mad. Don't work for these people in Washington. They work for you. Remind them of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott Bennett, everybody. And I'm sorry I can't show you his website, but shellgamewhistleblower.com. You can also go to patreon.com/shellgame. Scott is the author of that book. He discovered all kinds of information about terrorist financing, links between UBS, our agencies, what's the the company that I'm thinking about that you were investigating.
Hamilton.
Booz Allen Hamilton. All these guys are up to all kinds of no good. We're going to find out what's going on. I think these lawsuits that are being, or rather criminal cases that are being handled by Sidney Powell, the charges against Epstein, Keith Renier from the Nexium cult going to jail, the dominoes are falling, and I hope within the time span before the 2020 election, I want to see Bill and Hillary Clinton indicted.
Yes.
All right, Scott. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Tons of great subscriber-exclusive content this week alone. A whole library of wonderful stuff. Scott, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching. See you tomorrow. David Hawkins, Discovery CSI. Thanks, everybody.